Everyone, so in this video we will be going over how to design a simple four-wheel drive pushbot. First of all, I will be showing you how some of the features in Fusion 360 work. So we'll start off with the sketch tool. So here, once we hit the sketch tool, we can select which face we want to create our sketch on. So for our purposes now, we'll just select that face. We can create a circle by selecting circle here. So now we're in an additional menu that's just opened, called the sketch menu. That happened after we created the sketch. So now I've hit circle in the create sub menu, and we can define the point about which we want the circle. Let's make it the origin, and we can set the diameter of this circle by hitting D on our keyboard. Open the dimension tool. You can see alternatively we could have just hit this option here, and now we want to set the diameter. So let's select that and let's make it, let's say, 30 millimeters. Right? Brilliant. Now we want to create a rectangle. Say we want to create a rectangle around this circle. So we can go over to create, we can go over to rectangle, and we can go over to center rectangle, right? So this will create a rectangle around, sort of centered around a particular point. So let's make that the origin. So I'm selecting the origin here, dragging it out, I guess horizontally and now vertically. Now we have it so that it's always centered around the origin. Right, so that's brilliant, but we haven't constrained the geometry yet, essentially. And you know that because these lines are blue as opposed to black like the circle. So the circle is black because it's fully constrained. We can't drag it about and change things as we can with this rectangle or square shape. So to constrain it, we're going to hit D on our keyboard or hit the sketch dimension tool. We're going to drag, we're going to select the geometry that we want to constrain. So let's make that 50 millimeters. Typing in 50, and let's make this also 50 millimeters. So we've created a sketch now, and you're probably thinking, well, brilliant, what can we do with this sketch? Well, with this sketch, we're often going to be doing is making a solid body using the extrude tool. Let's select the extrude tool here, and just to show you how that works, we select an area, we drag it upwards, let's say 10 millimeters now. So now we've created a solid body, right? This is something that you could save as a mesh and 3D print if you really wanted to. Okay, so you're also seeing here surface, right? What the hell is a surface, okay, versus a solid? So a surface is essentially something that doesn't really have any thickness, right? So we can select, say we do use the extrude tool in the surface menu, right? We can select this. In fact, we can select the whole thing, right? We can try and create a solid body in the surface menu, right? So what happens? Let's drag it up 10 mil. And you can see it's done this, right? This is typically not what we want. It's created basically two surface bodies. It's created three. Has it done that then? I'm not sure. Anyway, doesn't really matter for the purposes of this video, but you can see it's created surface bodies. That's not really what we want. We want something with thickness for now. So we're not going to bother with the surface menu. Delete that over here, and now we've created our body like this. You might be wondering at this point, how have I been moving about? How have I been adjusting the view of the thing that I've just made? So in order to sort of drag the camera, that's what we're doing, right? We're moving the camera about the thing that we've made. The thing that we've made doesn't move. So to drag the camera left and right, I press down on my scroll wheel, and I drag left to right, or up and down, up to you. To orbit the thing that we've made, I hit the shift key on my keyboard at the same time as pressing down on the scroll wheel. So to do that, I'm pressing down the shift and the scroll wheel at the same time, and you can see now up and down we orbit sort of in this direction, and then left to right in that direction. So that's how you can sort of pan and orbit your body. Now, there are a few other things that we might want to adjust before we proceed. So that's the view of how geometry that you've made appears on your screen. So to change that, we go over to display settings. We can select just shaded, for instance, and that doesn't really emphasize any of the edges on our body. I don't really like that. I like to have some edges highlighted. Alternatively, we can go shaded with hidden edges. That shows all the edges, including the ones that aren't visible for our particular camera position. So I actually prefer shaded with visible edges only. Furthermore, you can change whether we're using orthographic or perspective, right? If we use perspective, right, that's sort of applying perspective effect, right? When we see things in real life, there is a perspective effect. I kind of hate this for CAD modeling. I'd much rather go with the orthographic view. Up to you. Personally, I prefer orthographic. This is very much a personal preference thing. Okay, so now we can proceed, following that little quick overview, to defining the first sketch that we're going to use to create our pushbot. So, I'm afraid the processes that I'm going to complete to make this robot probably aren't going to make sense until you've seen the PowerPoint. So maybe at this point, you might want to have a look at the PowerPoint to see where I'm going to go with all this, right? Because it probably be scratching your head thinking, what is he trying to do otherwise? So anyway, first of all, let's create our sketch and let's select this plane here, right? First thing we're going to do is create a rectangle, right? So we're going to create a rectangle like this, and we're going to create a line. So yes, I should probably have done that in a more easy to follow way. So hit the rectangle. It's in our sketch menu, right? Drag it. Now we've created a rectangle. We're going to create some lines now. So hit the line tool. Just drag it down like that. We want this distance to be 40 millimeters, right? Let's type in 40, and I just use the sketch dimension tool there. So I'm going to use that again. I'm going to say this line is going to be 20 millimeters. Right? Now I want this dimension to be 20 millimeters. So I'm going to select dimension tool again, type in 20, and I'm going to create some line, like a triangle shape here. So I'm going to use the line tool. Right, and you can see how that's automatically applied a constraint, right? It's automatically, Fusion thinks that I want this line to be perpendicular to this line, right? And that is in fact the case. If we don't want that to be the case, we can select the constraint that it's applied for us and delete it. And now we're free to make it not perpendicular, right? But in this instance, we want it to be perpendicular. So we select this line, we hit the perpendicular constraint, and we select the other line. So what often happens is Fusion will apply constraints, and you decide whether or not to keep these constraints. Typically, you will also have to add extra constraints. Make sure that geometry is fully constrained. Yeah, take a shot every time he says constrained. Yeah. Anyway, let's finish defining this geometry. So we're going to add some more lines now. Let's do this. And we want this sort of rectangle shape to be central with respect to the rest of the geometry. So what that means is we want it to be more in a position like that as opposed to what it was, right? So what we're going to do that is we're going to go over to create and then point. I'm going to select point there, and then we're going to make these sort of in line with one another, basically. So there we are, aligned, right? Now, what do we want this line to be in terms of length? So we select it, dimension that now, that should be, at least in my case, 10 millimeters. Let's make this 2.4 millimeters. Right, let's replicate this effectively over here using the line tool. Right, let's make that equal to this line here, equal in length. So I'm just using the equal constraint there, and we can make this line equal this line. So we haven't haven't defined what that length is yet, so there's no point. So yes, this should be 12 millimeters. And this distance should be, okay, yeah, that is over constrained. Whoopsie daisy. Oh yeah, and we should probably make this whole thing central about this origin point here. So what we're going to do is select this point here, horizontal, vertical, do that, basically. Right. So, finish constraining things. We're going to make this line equal to that line there. Okay, and we're going to make this central around this point. So I'm going to add another point. There it is, there it is. So, select that point, horizontal, vertical, select that point there. And we're going to make this line the same distance from this line as it is over here. So hit that dimension tool. There we are. And instead of typing 2.4 again, we can just select geometry that we previously created. There we are. And we want this to be a certain distance. So we're going to hit D on our keyboard, or we could have alternatively selected the sketch dimension tool there. We're going to select that. To make that 20 mil. So we're almost done. We just have some more geometry to define. So we're going to use our line tool now. And we're going to make sure that it's a construction line. So a construction line is a line that you can't use during an extrude operation. It is primarily just for constraining geometry, basically. So we're going to make sure it's a construction line. We're going to draw a line from there to there and there to there, basically. Now we're going to create a circle. So we're going to create a circle at the center point. You can see there now, Fusion is thinking that we still want the circle to be made of a construction line. That's not necessarily the case. So we don't have to delete our geometry. What we can do is just select the geometry that we want to be a solid line. We just toggle the construction option in the sketch palette. Yeah, I probably should have said the sketch palette turns up whenever you create a sketch, basically. So this contains some useful things like 3D sketch and construction versus solid line type. Various things you might end up using. So yeah, let's do the same. Actually, let's define this as 4.4 millimeters. Okay, let's do the same thing on the other side. Still thinks I want it to be a construction line. So in order to stop creating everything with construction lines, we can just turn that off now and it will all be solid lines. We want this circle to be the same diameter as this circle, so we select the equal constraint up here. There we are. Create a line from there to there, there to there. Now, what do we want from these lines? We want both these lines to be horizontal, so we're going to select both of them. And in order to select both of them, I just selected one, then hold down Control on my keyboard, selected the other one, and then we go over to horizontal / vertical. Now they're both horizontal, right? But they're not necessarily tangential to the circle, and we do actually want them to be tangential. So we select both of them. Actually, we can't do both of them at once. We need to do them one at a time. So we select one line, hit the tangential constraint tool, make it tangential, do the same thing with the other line. What I'm just going to do, without talking about it so much, is the same thing on the other side. There's our first sketch done. Brilliant. Now, we're going to create another sketch on this plane. So this is the plane that is visible looking from top down, basically. We'll select this plane, and then we'll do some projections, right? So let's hit S, open project, basically. So what is project? Project it allows us to essentially use geometry that we've created in previous sketches within a new sketch, and that's exactly what we're going to do here, right? And we can use projects to constrain things in our new sketch, right? So we can constrain a new sketch based off geometry in an old sketch. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, things we want to constrain or project are this line, and this line. Brilliant. So to make things a little less sort of, I don't know, overstimulating, we can hide the sketch that we previously made, and now what we're going to do is create a rectangle. So we're going to hit R on our keyboard or select a rectangle in the Create submenu. Just do that. And now we're going to create some points on our rectangle. So we're going to go over to point. We're going to put our point in the middle. And you see, I probably should have mentioned this or talked about it more earlier, but know that the point is in the middle of the line when there's a little triangle that comes up. So if you just drag it along, wait for that little triangle to turn up, then you know it's in the middle, right? So we want this little point to be sort of next, like at the same position as this point here. So we can just drag it like that. You can see now this line is constrained. Alternatively, we can select one point, hit the coincident option, and select the other option, the other point there. So brilliant. Now this rectangle is that's how it sort of looks with the sketch we previously made. Now I want to set the width of the rectangle. So in my case, this should be 66 millimeters. Right? 66. There we are. Brilliant. We're not done yet though, because we want to create some reference geometry using some construction lines, basically. So this is going to be a rectangular reference, so we just use the rectangle option here. Brilliant. But that's in a solid line. So what we do is we can hit select, make sure that's a window selection. Typically you want a window selection. We just drag over geometry that we want to turn into construction lines, and then we hit construction. Brilliant. Actually, we haven't finished our sketch. I'm not sure why I hit finish sketch there. So let's go back. Let's right click and let's edit sketch. And what are the dimensions of this reference geometry? So this should be 10 millimeters. And this line should, if it were to continue, pass through this point. But it's not going to go like through this point, if that makes sense. So to achieve that, we're going to use the coincident constraint with that line selected, hit coincident, and then that point. There we go. What offset should this be from this line? Well, in my case, it should be 1.6 millimeters. So we select that line, select dimension, select this line, and we're going to make that 1.6, right? How long should this be? Well, in my case, it should be 24 millimeters. So let's make that 24. And brilliant. So that's one thing done. Now we want to create some geometry that we are later going to use to create something that will hold our lid, basically, to the top of the robot. So to create this geometry, we're going to create two circles. Inner one is going to be 2 millimeters. So hit D on the keyboard, type in 2. The outer one is going to be offset from the inner one by 1.6 millimeters. So select the outer one, D, select the inner one, type in 1.6. There we are. Okay, and now let's make sure that let's create some lines. So you can see the tangent constraint turned up because it fusion detected that we thought that we want this line to be tangential to this circle. That is in fact the case, but we also want these lines to be horizontal. So we select both of them, hit the horizontal constraint tool there. Now, where do we want this to be along this line, and how far away do we want it to be from this line, basically? So to do that, we're going to create another construction line. Hit line tool there, draw the line from the center of this circle to this point here. And to make this construction line, we're going to select it and then hit construction. Okay, now we can drag this point until a little triangle appears. And that means that this point Okay, that's a bit confusing. Why is it on Earth? Fusion is having a bit of an aneurysm. Let's undo that. Let's drag this until it finds the triangle. There we are. So now we can only move this in and out. We can't move it up and down. Brilliant. And we want this outer circle to be offset from this line by 1.6 millimeters, right? So we're going to go over and we're going to create a point. We're going to put the point here, and we're going to hit D on our keyboard, or alternatively, select this in the create menu, and we're going to set this to be 1.6 millimeters, basically. Nice. Now we want to mirror everything. Okay, so we want this geometry to be on the other side, and we want this geometry to be up here, and also here and here. So we're going to do one mirror after another. To use the mirror tool, we're going to need to create mirror lines. So hit line tool, and then we're going to make sure it's a construction line. We're going to draw one line from the top to bottom, and we're going to draw another line from this point here to the origin. So first mirror operation, we're going to hit mirror in the create submenu here. We're going to select the first object that we want to mirror. That's now selected as an object here. We're going to hit the mirror line, and we're going to select that there. Brilliant. Now we're going to do another mirror. We're going to select some of the objects here. We're going to select the objects here, and now we're going to just click on them as opposed to drawing a window around them, the other objects that we want to mirror. And we're going to select the mirror line here. Now we have created our second sketch that we're going to use to create the pushbot, right? So when we look at both sketches, they appear like this. So yeah, one thing I have been doing but haven't really been talking about is you can hide sketches and make them visible, basically, as you wish. So if we want to look at our sketches, we hit this arrow here, and we select the sort of the eye icon, toggle it basically to view and hide our sketch, basically. So there we are. Sometimes we want to hide sketches to sort of see our bodies without all the messy geometry that we used to define them. So that's why that's an option, basically. Okay, so let's actually start making bodies, right? Firstly, we're going to do an extrude. So we're going to select the extrude option here, select this rectangle, and then it's going to be a two-sided extrude, okay? Actually, we don't have to do two-sided extrude. It's going to be a one-sided extrude that we can make symmetric. So one of the ways you can do an extrude is you can just set a distance here. So here it's minus 13 millimeters. Alternatively, you can use sketch geometry to define the extent of your extrude. So here, we're going to select two object, and we're going to select this point, right? So we can see the extrude is not exceeding this line here or that point there. We want the same thing to happen on the other side, so we can select, where is it? Symmetric, right? So that's brilliant because we didn't have to select the corresponding point on the other side. We could just make it a symmetric extrude. Okay, we've created our first extrude. Now what we're going to use is the shell tool, basically. Let's select shell, and then we'll select the faces. And the way that I like to think of it is that we like to select the faces that we want to be open, right? So we're selecting 3 faces now, and we're going to set the thickness of the shell as 1.6 millimeters. That's what the shell tool has done, right? It's made all the faces that we've selected open, and it's sort of added thickness to the faces that we didn't select, right? So if, for instance, we use the shell tool in different ways, so say we selected these faces as the ones that we wanted to be open, that's what it would have done, basically, right? But we don't want to do that. We want to do what we did in the first instance, which was that. Okay, we're not done with extrusions yet, so we're going to make our geometry visible again by clicking the eye icons there, and we're going to extrude some more. So we're going to select these, So I'm holding Control on my keyboard as I select those areas, hit the extrude function, distance to object. Let's select this point. Let's make it symmetric. Okay, there we are. We have created something that is resembling, well, I mean, I would say it's starting to resemble a chassis a little bit. Right, so this interior cavity is going to hold, so from here to sort of here, that's going to hold our core electronics, so Malenki Nano battery, etc. These thicker sections, we're going to put cavities in them that will hold the motors, right? How are we going to create these cavities? Well, we're going to make sort of, I like to call them modifier bodies, right? So we're going to make those modifier bodies next. For now, we can hide that body and we can make our sketches visible again. To create our modifier bodies, we're going to select these areas now. So this, on the side, holding down Control. Those areas, we're going to hit Extrude. We're going to select a two-sided extrude this time. So previously we've been using a one-sided extrude and we've made it symmetric. Now it's going to be a two-sided extrude. So two-sided, we're going to select the extent to object, and then we're going to set this point as the extent. We're going to do the same thing or similar thing for the other distance. So we're going to set to object, and we're going to set this point as the extent of the extrude. Okay, so we're on our way to creating modifier bodies. We're not done with these modifier bodies yet. So we'll make that sketch visible again, and now we're going to select these areas, right? So I'm going to hit E on our keyboard, or we can select this extrude option in the create submenu. So hit E, and then we're going to do a two-sided extrude again. We're going to set to object to like this point here. That will be extent of one. That'll be one of the extents, and we're going to set the other extent to be this point. So to object, and then over here. And in this instance, it is cut all the way through our modifier body. And that's not what we want at all, right? We actually want it to join. So we go over to Operation and we select Join. There we are. Our modifier bodies are complete, at least on one side. What we're going to do in a minute is mirror these two modifier bodies on the other side so that we can then subtract them from our main chassis geometry. There's also something else that we want to mirror, and that is the wedge that we're going to have on the front of our robot. Wedge is not going to run along the whole front length of our robot, so that is why we are choosing to extrude and then mirror. Right, so let's create one half wedge, select, and then hit E on our keyboard. We're going to do a very similar thing, so two-sided direction, to object, and then we're going to select this point here, and then we're going to select this point here. And that's created 3 new bodies for us to then mirror on the opposite side. So, to mirror, we're going to go into the Create submenu, hit on Create, and then select Mirror here. We want to make sure that we select bodies as the object type, basically. So, if it's set to components, we won't be able to select these bodies, because guess what? They're bodies, not components, right? Component is, you'll probably understand this later on, but component can consist of multiple bodies, right? So it's usually like a higher level. It's like, you could think of it almost as like a sub-assembly, but then that's probably overcomplicating things. Anyway, now we're working in bodies, so we select bodies in our mirror, in our object type, the mirror menu. So we select our bodies that we want to mirror. In this case, we want to mirror them around this plane. Brilliant. So now we want to subtract essentially these bodies from the body that we created earlier. So to do that, we're going to use the combine tool. Now, first of all, make things easier, we'll hide this body. So we can just select it, see where it's underlined, and then hide it. We're going to access the combine tool, which is this one. And we're going to select our tool bodies, which in this case is the modifier bodies that we created. We're going to select all of them. and then we're going to make our main chassis body visible. We're going to select that as the target body. And you can see now Fusion thinks that I want to combine all these bodies together. That is not the case. I want to subtract the tool bodies from the target body. So in order to do that, I use the cut tool. Okay, and in doing that, you can see now, if we just hide the sketches, that we've created cavities for the motors to sit in, basically. Brilliant. We're not done yet. We want to join these sort of wedge bodies to the main chassis body. So we're going to do another combine tool. So select combine, hit the target body and select the tool bodies. Because we had cut previously selected, it thinks we want to do a cut operation again. That's not in fact the case. We want to join. So we hit join. And there we go. That's all done. Now we can change the color of this chassis body if we want. Totally optional step. But in order to do that, we hit A on our keyboard to open the appearances menu. Okay. Don't worry about all this. You can just go over here, look at fabric, glass, whatever. Let's say we just want to paint, right? So click paint and glossy if you want, and then we can make it white. So we can just drag the white sort of sphere onto our body, and there we go. Now it's white. So leave this menu. I think we can just hit escape. There we go. Now it's white. We can add chamfers now. Chamfers are something that we can use to make things look a bit cooler, a bit more interesting looking. They have limited functional use. More of an aesthetic thing. Yeah, say we wanted to add a chamfer. I think we can find that in the modify body, modify submenu. Go over to chamfer, right? So we can and I think the easiest way to show you how chamfers work is to just do an operation. So let's say we select some edges that we want to chamfer. There we are. Let's say we want to chamfer by 2.4 millimeters, right? So what's going on? Well, what the chamfer has done is it's essentially created a new face at each edge that we've selected, and it's done that by sort of cutting into the existing geometry by a certain amount. So here we've selected 2.4 millimeters as the amount that we cut into the existing geometry to create the chamfer, basically. And there we go. That's the chamfer made. So we hit OK, and now we have some nice chamfered edges that really make our robot look a bit cooler. Now let's create some geometry that it's going to be used to hold the lid up. So we'll make the second sketch that we made visible. We're going to select this geometry now. So I'm just holding down Control on my keyboard as I select the geometry. We're going to hit E on our keyboard for extrude. We're going to go over to a two-sided situation. We're going to select the extent of one of the extrudes as the bottom surface. And we don't want this to cut into our existing geometry. We want this to sort of join, right? So we go over to operation and we click join. We can see now that's adding new geometry. What about the other extent? Right, so the other extent, first of all, we're going to go to object and then to the top surface, right? But we want this geometry to be recessed a little bit from the sort of top surface of this chassis here in order for the lid to sort of be flush, essentially. I think it's easiest if I just show you what I mean. So in order to have this be recessed from the top surface, what we can do is that we can now select distance here, and we can see it's minus 10 millimeters, right? So what we can do is add plus 1.6. Say we want our lid to be 1.6 millimeters thick. You can recess this from the top surface by 1.6 millimeters so that our lid is flush with the surface. Okay, brilliant. And now we need a through hole through which the bolt can go through to secure the lid. So how do we do that, basically? So we make this now single body invisible. Select these two areas. So select one, hold down Control, select the other, and then hit E on our keyboard for extrude, make our body visible again. And we can do a two-sided extrude, distance to object for one, make it the top surface. Distance to object for the other, we can make that the bottom surface. And there we are. Now we have a through hole for our bolts that we're going to use to secure the lid. You can see that hole goes all the way through. Okay, so now let's make a lid, right? So how do we do that? Well, we create a new, first of all, we create a new plane, right? You might be thinking, well, what the hell are planes? So planes are things we make sketches on, essentially. So if we hide the bodies, make origin stuff visible, you can see that by default we get some planes, basically. Now we can make our sketches on these planes. Let's say we want to make the sketch on a different plane. We have to make one, essentially. So to create our plane, we click offset plane. In this case, you can create all sorts of different planes, but for now, if we just hit this icon and then select the surface on which we want to make the plane, there's our plane made. Now we want to create a sketch, so just create sketch, select this plane, and we're going to make our lid by projecting some geometry. So hit S on our keyboard to open the shortcuts, and we find project. There we are. Project some lines now. So let's project these lines. Let's project these circles. Brilliant. So we've now created something that we can extrude. Let's hit E on our keyboard to extrude this surface here. And we want to create a new body. We don't want this to become one body with the existing body that we have. We want to create a new lid body that is separate from the rest of the chassis. So there's our lid. We can make it black if we want. So into the appearance menu, scroll down, and we can find paint, enamel, glossy, or black. So you can drag that over. Now that's black. Brilliant. It now looks a little bit smarter. However, this is a pretty awful lid because it's going to be rubbing right up against the chassis, right? And it's going to be, basically, if we were to make this, it's going to be really tight against chassis. It's going to be a pain to put the lid in. So what we want to do is offset some faces on the lid so that there is some, basically some tolerance or gap roughly here. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to hide everything but the lid. So that means this body. And we're going to go over to press pull. And we're going to select some faces now. So this face here, this other face, and this other face. And we're going to offset it by 0.2 millimeters. So here it's done it by -1. That looks very silly. Let's not do that. Let's do around -0.2. This is good for most 3D printed parts. So -0.2 millimeters now. And we can see now our lid is offset somewhat from the chassis, basically. That looks pretty good. And that will work well if we were to try and make it. So now we want to add some wheels to our robot. So how do we do that? So with wheels, typically you can buy them online, or you can choose to make them. I think most beginners choose to buy some. So here we are on the Bristol Bot Builders website. I like using these wheels because they provide you with something called a step file for each size of wheel. So what is a step file? Well, a step file is a file that contains information to create effectively like a solid body in Fusion. So we can download this file and then open it, and it will be like a solid body that we can then use within our designs, essentially. So yeah, if you click on this option, you'll be taken to an option to download the corresponding step file. And what you can then do is click on open. I've already done this, so you can click on open, select the step file. Right, so let's say we do that. And you would then save it somewhere in your Fusion area. I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it again. Let's save. Right, so how do we add the wheel, basically, to our design here? Click on this, we find where we saved the wheel, and we simply drag it in, basically. So yeah, it never ends up in a useful position whatsoever, so what we're going to do is just drag these and just position it out of the way to begin with. Now we're going to do a point-to-point operation. So we're going to select point-to-point here. We're going to select this partial circle here, and we're going to see that the blue little cross in the middle is selected. And then we're going to go over here, going to make sure that that similar blue cross is selected. And we're going to do that. Just click it, and there we go. So what's happened in our point-to-point is that the blue crosses have met up with one another effectively. This isn't very good, so because we want typically for our wheel to be offset somewhat from our chassis, so we can click on free move, and we can move this about 0.5 millimeter. Go 0.5 millimeters here. Okay, let's do the same thing for the front wheel. So we're going to drag it this way, and rotate it 90 degrees. Do a point-to-point operation. So select this, that's blue in the middle. Select this, that's also blue in the middle. And we're going to move it down 0.5 mil. Let's make that 0.5 millimeters. Okay, now we want wheels to be on the other side, so we can go over to mirror. And this time, because these are components, not bodies, we can go over and select components, and we can select these two wheels we just imported. We can select the mirror plane, which is one of the default planes that Fusion gave us, and now it's mirrored on the other side. So there it is, our finished four-wheel drive pushbot with 25mm wheels. This is something that you could feasibly then 3D print. So we would save this as a mesh file, so we can save it as an STL or a 3MF. If we were to save it as an STL, 3MF, we could then save it somewhere on our computer, open it in a slicing program like Orca Slicer or Cura, even. And in doing so, we could then prepare some G code for our 3D printer to run, then create the object, really. And yeah, that is now something that you could feasibly manufacture if you wanted to. And yeah, thanks for watching. Sorry if this video turned out to be a bit longer than you were hoping, but yeah, that's how you go about making a simple pushbot in Fusion 360.